And welcome, everyone. We're so happy to see you here, so happy to see this big Fabric community. And today we're going to talk about the latest in data science and AI in Microsoft Fabric. My name is Nelly Gustafson. I lead the product team for Synapse Data Science and AI. And with me, I have my colleague, Eren.
Hi there, I'm Eren Orbe. I'm a product manager on Nelly's team who works on data science and AI in Fabric.
All right. Yeah, so we're super excited to get started. We have a lot of content to cover because we wanted to jam in as much as possible. There's so much we want to share with all of you. So this is what we had in mind, roughly. We're going to start off talking about our data science features in Fabric, what's new around that. We're also going to highlight one of our customers. We're going to join us and tell us about their journey and what they have done with data science in Fabric. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit, still talking about how we improve the productivity for data scientists and data engineers, right, as part of Fabric, but we're going to switch gears to talk about AI. All right. And we'll also have some good links and recommendations for other sessions where you can learn more and get some deep dives. So stay tuned for that in the end, for the call to action in the end. All right. So let's get started talking about end-to-end data science in Fabric, right? And many of you are familiar with how the data science workflow works. And the way that we like to talk about data science in Fabric is really to say that whether you're an analyst, whether you're a data scientist that professionally works and builds models, whoever you are, a data engineer, we want to show you the value that Fabric is adding into the data science workflow, right? And we can also talk about, towards the end, more around, well, the data science workflow or the ML workflow is actually quite similar, even when you're talking about building things with AI, right? You still need to define a problem, ask a question, right? You still need to go and prep, discover, explore the data, go and prep it, and make it ready for building ML models or AI models. And you then start essentially, whether it's a pre-trained model, an already in large language model that you're invoking, or a custom machine learning model, the process is relatively similar in that you're preparing, you're exploring, you're evaluating, and once you have a model, then you can start enriching your data or getting the answers to those questions that you're asking, right? So roughly, this is the process. So if we talk about what is special about Fabric and how does Fabric uniquely help you to do this in an easier, simpler way? Well, number one, we in Fabric are in the same platform as Power BI, right? How many Power BI users do we have here? See lots of hands up. I was expecting that. And that closeness to Power BI is really going to help you to tap into that rich semantic layer of data and do that from tools that are very familiar to data scientists. For example, Python and notebooks. So we have semantic link. We're going to talk about that in a bit. There's also sessions on this later today. But with semantic link, you can tap into this really early on in the process as you're formulating the questions. So that's really key, right? Because now you can tap into that data. You can tap into that data, but also other data. All the data that's sitting in one lake is at your disposal. Whether that data sits physically in one lake or whether that data actually is shortcutted in, or you can actually mirror data into Fabric. That's the power of Fabric, right? The superpower. It can reach pretty much any data out there. And then you process that data using a lakehouse, notebooks, Python, Spark. And then you have the data to be able to explore it for ML modeling. And you kind of enter that inner loop for machine learning. And for that, we've added tools, low-code tools that Eren is going to talk about in a bit, Data Wrangler, to help you wrangle that data and generate code. We've also added Synapse ML out of the box in Fabric. It is a library that we own and maintain that is super powerful because it's going to help you to massively scale your ML pipelines, right, and build your machine learning model training. So that's also in here. And we use ML Flow. We standardize on ML Flow, which means that you can just use whatever ML Flow APIs you use outside of Fabric, and you can bring those scripts in, those notebooks in, and they will just work in Fabric with a built-in ML flow endpoint. So you create models and experiments, right? And those are items in your workspace. And then you continue with your lakehouse. You enrich the data, put the predictions in the lake. And this is one end-to-end scenario that we're going to cover. And we have other ones coming in. Oren's going to show you that. And then you run your predictions, and you get your insights. And the beauty of this is that closeness to Power BI, because now your enriched data in one lake is directly accessible to your Power BI reports. It automatically becomes a semantic model. And now you can just feed that data to your business users, wherever is consuming it. And this closeness is really the power, because it accelerates this process drastically. And we're going to talk about that when we talk to our customer later, too. So if we dive deeper into, for example, semantic link as a feature, you can think of semantic link, which was kind of in the beginning, right? How you tap into that semantic model. It is essentially a Python SDK for working with the semantic model. So we started off semantic link as a data science tool, but very quickly we realized that a lot of data engineers and BI engineers love semantic link. How many of you have used semantic link or heard about it? All right, then you should go to a session later today that's going to talk more about this. But essentially, it's not just about tapping into the tables in the semantic model, right, or the measures. We actually recently also added tools in semantic link for you to be able to automate BI tasks like refreshing your data sets. So a lot of these things are essentially being evolved, and we listen to the community, put your ideas out there, and we listen to you, and we can enrich semantic link as a library further. We're going to talk about that more in other sessions today, and we'll post you a link to where you can go. But essentially, this is that loop to kind of make it quicker. So with this, I'm going to hand it off to Oren to talk a little bit more around some of these core data science features that we just talked about in the end-to-end process.
Thank you, Nelly. Can everyone hear me? My friends in the back? All righty. Thanks, and welcome to those of you who are trickling in. We have a lot to show you on the roadmap, but we wanted to start with the current features in market in Fabric Data Science that are designed to make that workflow shown a few slides ago easier. So everything from data discovery and preparation, through managing your models, tracking experiments, through deployment, and beyond. This journey often starts with data preparation, which is a huge drain for a lot of our customers. I count myself in that category. You know, long before you can do modeling, you have to get the data ready, you have to bring it in, do pre-processing, featurize, and so forth. And we want to add experiences in Fabric Data Science that make that easier. So one way we've done this is by bringing in Data Wrangler, which was born out of the developer division. It's available as a VS Code extension into Fabric. So you go into a Fabric notebook and it's built in right there, and it's a feature that allows you to open up a data frame in this rich, immersive, kind of Excel-like view where you have built-in statistics and visualizations. You can browse the distribution of numeric variables in the column headers. You can get a sense of the different values for your categorical columns, and then you can start doing data preparation right there in a matter of clicks. So it is low code. We have this library of operations that you can apply, and you get instant previews that show you the result of those steps, and you get the code below it in this pane. So everything kind of comes in real time. And we call Data Wrangler low code because it does support users who might be rusty on the pandas syntax or newer to data science, kind of citizen data scientists, but we keep the code front and center for transparency and reproducibility. So at the end of any of these sessions, you can copy the code back into your notebook, or you can land it all back into your notebook as a reproducible script and then go from there. This experience started with pandas, but in Fabric it now supports Spark, so you can take larger data samples and sort of bring them down, do transformations, and upskill between pandas and Spark syntax with translation that we provide. And coming in the future are going to be a whole range of AI experiences that allow you to do things like give Data Wrangler a command in natural language and then generate the corresponding code. So that's a Python situation, but I don't want to neglect any of the R lovers in the room. Is anyone in here an R developer? All right, we got some hands. We don't want to forget that experience too. So Fabric has a built-in R runtime that allows you to do your data analysis and your modeling in R as well. We have built-in support for a lot of popular open source packages. You can work in notebooks, you can work in Spark job definitions, and we have library management capabilities that allow you to do upgrades to any of those libraries if you need new versions, or even to upload a custom package that your team has developed. The idea is that we want to give developers the tools of their choice. R often is one of those tools, and so we have support for that. If you want to learn more about our lightweight pure Python notebooks or T-SQL notebooks for working against your data warehouse, you can come to a session we have in a few hours with my colleague Piero Morano, focused solely on the developer experience. All right, so you've trained your data, you've done some analysis, and now you actually want to get started with modeling. As Nelly mentioned, Fabric is built on top of an integration with MLflow, the open source platform for managing machine learning life cycles. And so we have models and experiments as first-class items in your Fabric workspace. You can use all those APIs directly from the notebook, but whenever you're doing an experiment and sort of keeping track of those runs, or you're saving those runs as model versions, they exist as UI items in your workspace that you can go and explore in another interactive pane. So you can take a look from the notebook, or you can actually go and navigate to an experiment, and you have built-in charts that allow you to compare runs, sort of decide which ones you want to save as registered versions, and then go from there. We have support for auto-logging, so a lot of this tracking doesn't need anything manual from you. You can reduce a lot of the extraneous code in your notebooks and just take care of those experiences right out of the box. We'll take care of it behind the scenes and log it for you. And then once you go to those experiment runs and you decide which you want to promote to save model versions, we're kind of saving that all for you in an MLflow powered registry on top of AML. And so there's opportunity there for other integrations down the line. But what it means is that you have your models in a safe place when you need to do what they're meant for, which is to work on data that they haven't seen and start bringing in predictive insights into your workflow. When we talk about deployment, we start with batch scoring in Fabric. So batch inferencing, taking larger sets of data, feeding them to your model in a Spark session, and then enriching data that might be in your lakehouse with those predictive insights. So we have a predict function as part of Synapse ML, which Nelly will talk more about in a few slides, that allows you to just specify the name of your model, the version of your model, the data that you want to feed into the model. We'll take care of the predictions for you in Spark, and then you can write those predictions back to your lakehouse where they can be consumed from other places. So Power BI is, of course, a really popular tool. We love it. A lot of you love it. You can serve predictions from the lakehouse in Fabric to your Power BI reports with direct lake mode seamlessly with zero lead time. And that's a really built-in experience unified that speaks to kind of the nature of Fabric as a platform that wants to promote unification and collaboration among these different experiences. Coming soon, we're also going to have real-time endpoints in Fabric, which I'll talk about in another section, which allow you to deploy your models in another way for different scenarios and get access to them in other Fabric engines and also in your own web apps. Now, if you don't like the idea of writing code yourself to do that batch inferencing, we give you the option to take advantage of the user interface for your model item and to walk through a series of steps that will write that code for you. So we want to make it easy for someone who hasn't trained the model herself or himself to just go in and take advantage of it. You can apply the model with prefigured code templates. You can walk through a wizard that is going to say, hey, this is my source data that I want to feed to the model. Here's how I want to map it to the inputs. This is where I want to land the predictions. And we'll generate the code for you that you can then run without having to write any of it yourself. So we're building in these ways to allow a wide range of roles in Fabric to take advantage of the same resources. We sometimes talk about democratizing data science. What we want to do is make it easy for you to get value out of your models regardless of your role in the organization or your level of training. We want to make it easy and friendly. And then we give you power to scale up those machine learning workloads with our Synapse ML function, which I'm going to hand it back over to Nelly to tell you a little bit more detail about.
Thank you, Ren. So we talk a lot about Synapse ML, and people hear it. It is a Spark library. It is open source, but it has some proprietary pieces like Predict that you saw for scalable batch scoring in Fabric. That is unique to Fabric. But generally, this is our open source library. And we hear from customers a lot to say that, well, I can build out many machine learning models, and I can build out my pipelines, but as my data grows, and I get to, billions of rows or petabytes of data, it's really hard for me to scale that ML, right? and even AI, right? And that's where Synapse ML comes in. Because in Fabric, a lot of our data science experiences today and data engineering are powered by Spark. And using the power of Spark, we can then build out scalable distributed machine learning. And that's really what Synapse ML is about. But a big part of Synapse ML is also about creating a bridge to AI. And right now, in the era of AI and Gen AI, that's where Synapse ML is playing a key role for us to not only be able to process data to make that data ready for LLMs, right? You need to process data and make it ready for AI processing as well. So that's where Synapse ML also can help. By integrating deeply with Azure AI services, we give you capabilities inside of Fabric through Synapse ML to not only get a built-in gateway directly to Azure OpenAI models, but also to former cognitive services models, AI services. For example, things like being able to analyze text, or we're working on adding support for analyzing PDF forms, right? These type of things are important because you have all of these assets sitting in one lake, and you need to extract certain entities to make them available for Gen AI, right? And these type of data engineering pipelines or AI engineering pipelines are critical for you to be able to tap into that data, even with Gen AI, right? To Arun's point in the keynote earlier, that you need to make the data ready and make sure that it's in a good shape for AI as well. So with that direct bridge to these AI libraries, you basically get a scalable way where we take care of the scaling. You invoke APIs to call LLMs or AI services, and we make sure that we batch things in an intelligent way, that you can scale and you can send billions of rows for processing. You're not going to run into these scale limitations. And that's the hard part of this, right? You can do it for a few, a small number of rows, it's doable, but as you scale out, that's when it becomes hard. So that's where Synapse ML helps. All right, so we talked about data science and Fabric. You saw some of the key features. Now, let's talk a little bit more about a real use case for how one of our customers, Nebraska Furniture Mart, have been using data science in Fabric. So I'm going to welcome Jerry to come up on stage.
Thank you.
And Jerry, so you guys are a Berkshire Hathaway company, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your organization?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chungyue Pan, and you can call me Jerry, and I'm the data architect at Nebraska Furniture Mart. So we are a Berkshire company, and we sell furniture applications that over 1,000 brand, and also our online store can ship in all the states. And what's more, our Texas store is the single furniture store, which is the biggest across the US. And it's really huge, and the size is more than 9 football fields. So when you get that traveling to Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Texas, welcome to check it out.
That's really impressive. 9 football
Yes,
courts.
it's really huge.
That's really huge.
You
Yes.
can totally spend one day in it.
Awesome. And I mean, when you have this type of, these warehouses, right, you need to do some form of a planning, right, and demand forecasting for your warehouses. And can you tell us a little bit more about some of the improvements that you could see by bringing your demand forecasting for warehouses into Fabric from an on-prem solution?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the main advantage that adopting the Fabric is that reducing the complexity by consolidating that our solution into the one single platform Fabric with all the possibilities in one place. So by doing this, that we can reduce that moving data from one place to another place and using one single of a copy. And also with that, since we are using the one platform, and then it will be simplify handling the security, development, and deployment process.
Awesome. So single platform really helped you, and then having one way to manage the security. And I think what was so impressive to me was that, on your on-prem pipeline that you have today, and I think this visual kind of shows that a little bit, the fact that you managed to reduce the processing time from over 24 hours down to 5 hours just in one try was really impressive. Can you tell us a little bit more about your your previous architecture before Fabric, so people kind of get a good sense of that.
Yeah, sure. So as you can see, that our previous architecture is that a traditional on-prem machine learning architecture. So we have that our on-prem database, and when we do the modeling, that we transfer the data and to a dedicated machine learning server, and then we train and predict random models, and then we export the forecasting result to a CSV file, and then to load it to the Tableau server and build the visualization for the clients.
Yes.
And considering that the data source is pretty huge, and also that we are training our model 1,000 times.
1,000 times.
Yeah, based on our different groups of the products and the warehouse. So the timing is pretty consuming a lot of time, more than 20 hours.
That's really amazing, thank you. I mean, I would really say, talking to many customers, this is a common pattern, especially if you're working on-prem. You typically have a dedicated machine learning server. You have to move the data multiple times. So I completely understand why Fabric could reduce some of these silos for you. In Fabric, you leverage multiple different workloads. For example, our data engineering and data science capabilities, and our Spark runtime and the notebooks. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the features that you're looking forward to using from this point on, as you evolve this solution inside of Fabric?
Yeah, so for this, when we adopt the Fabric, we basically try to simplify the patterns. So we are using the lakehouse to hosting our data, and then when we're doing the Python jobs, we're running on the same data. So we don't need to copy it from different places, and this will saving a lot of time by us. And in the future, this is the future enhancement we want to look into is one lake shortcut. This basically will reduce a lot of ingestions from our data, since that currently we have a lot of data in AWS Gen 2, so we don't need to ingest them. And also the semantic model, I'm really happy we have this one, so we can use it for our data science and also our analysts to tagging into our semantic model and do some analysis by themselves.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for sharing this. And I agree with you. One-click shortcuts, semantic link are really popular features. So we're really excited to work with you on adopting those going forward. So thank you so much, Jerry. And everyone, give Jerry a round of applause. All right. So we have a lot, as I mentioned, we have a lot of content. So in our next section, we're going to show you some never-before-seen glimpses and sneak peeks, as I like to call them, of features that are yet to come, right, or are in private preview. So I'm going to hand it off to Ren to show us some exciting demos.
Awesome. Thank you, Nelly. Can you all still hear me? Great. This mic has been trying to get away from me, so I'm glad to hear it. So we have a lot to show you. AI is coming. Don't worry, you're going to see it. But as Nelly said, I want to show off a few features that are going to define our roadmap in the near future for data science that bring together that unified story we talked about. So I'm going to talk about two features, and then I'm going to do a demo. We have a recorded video in the slides, but since we're in Vegas, I figure I'm going to try it live. The first feature that I want to talk about is automated machine learning with FLAML, which stands for Fast and Lightweight Automated Machine Learning. This is a lightweight Python library that comes from the smart folks at Microsoft Research, and we've brought it into Fabric to help you with machine learning, to streamline the process. So you can start off and say, this is a classification problem, and rely on FLAML to do the model selection and the tuning for you. Because we've integrated it in our product, we have an eye towards Spark, and we're letting you parallelize those runs with Spark so that you can do your AutoML trials at scale. It's not limited just to that Python use case. It's brought in a way that's compatible with the rest of the scenarios you might find yourself using Fabric Data Science for. And because of our MLflow integration, we have the auto logging available here too. So even as you're relying on FLAML to, say, streamline that process, you're getting all of the metrics and the parameters that are important to you logged by default in those model and experiment artifacts, really purely the experiment ones so that you can access them with the MLflow API in a notebook. You can also go into the UI, as I showed earlier, and explore those. So this is just one of the ways that we're trying to make that end-to-end data science and machine learning lifecycle easier with the help of some of these external tools. Now, once you have trained the model, I've already talked about how you can deploy it using our predict function. But real deployment scenarios tend to rely more on endpoints. So that's something we hear a lot about from customers is we don't want to just do the batch prediction scenario. We want to enable our model for use outside of Fabric, or we want to plop it into another Fabric experience so we can just kind of send a response right to a durable URL and send a request to a durable URL and get a prediction back in seconds. And so we're pleased to announce that this capability is now available in private preview. We'd love for you to try it out, and there will be call to action links at the end. But I'll just talk through a little bit how this works in Fabric and how it's consistent with our 5x5 mission of getting things started really simply in a matter of seconds, and then having a wonderful experience in a matter of minutes. So in Fabric, these real-time endpoints are not separate artifacts. They're not things you need to go and sort of provision manually on your own with a lot of configuration. They just exist as default properties of your registered models. So every model, and really every model version, has a URL that you can use if the model is set up for it to get real-time predictions, sub-second latency. And all you really need to do to activate those is, have a single click or call. We set these up to be auto provisioned. So if you have a model that you want to serve in real time, you can simply call the URL that's there displayed in Fabric for a prediction, and if it's not active, we will take care of setting it up for you. The infrastructure is all done behind the scenes with Azure Container Apps. We will make sure that it's live and running as an endpoint in a matter of minutes. You don't have to do anything. But we do also give you the option of activating these in a single click from the user interface. If you're not, exploring with the REST API, we have full support for both of those scenarios. So programmatically or from the model item, you can go in, manage these endpoints, check out their statuses, and sort of just take the, a curl command or a URL or other code snippets to start putting them into your apps. We have a default URL for the overall model artifact, and you can swap out versions behind it. So you don't need to update your deployments. You could put one of these URLs to an application, and then behind the scenes say, well, I've improved the model, I have a new and better version, let me put that one in instead. And because of our integration with Azure Container Apps, because we're using Azure Container Apps behind the scenes, we have support for a lot of features that are designed to save you costs and resources. So these models are going to scale according to the traffic that they're getting. You're not going to run up a lot of costs if you have an endpoint that isn't actively receiving predictions. And there's a lot we have on the roadmap here for this particular feature, so we'd love to hear from you if there's anything it sounds like I'm missing or anything you're really curious about. There will be call to action links at the end. But why don't I show off how these actually work by transitioning to a demo? So I mentioned that we do have one recorded, but why don't we try something live? I've been instructed to tell you also that our esteemed director of engineering is in the room, Marcus. He's in the back, visible for you in a pink shirt. So if anything goes wrong, feel free to take your anger and direct it to him after the fact. He did mention that he has a sweater in his bag, so if something goes wrong, he might put it on, but I think you'll still be able to find him. So I'm gonna hand this back to Nelly. We are going to do a little bit of magic here to switch our screens, and then I'll show you that endpoint experience on an end-to-end sample in Fabric. So now you can see my browser. I've started by pulling up the documentation for batch inferencing in Fabric with Predict. This is that experience I talked about that's already available in market if you want to take a larger set of data in Spark, feed it to a registered model, and get those predictions to write them to the lakehouse. But if we want to use an endpoint on a model, we can get started really with any of our samples. So here's the Fabric Data Science homepage. I've gone ahead and used one of our data science end-to-end samples and trained the model in advance for us. So I've used this machine failure model over here, which launches us into a notebook here that lives in a workspace.
Can everyone see, by the way, or should we zoom in? Is it possible?
I can zoom in a little bit, yeah. I might need to alter
Marcus is
there.
saying make it bigger.
Make it bigger. Is that a little better? It's full screen, but I can keep going.
Yeah.
We're going to play with it a little bit, but in any case, this is a notebook that was generated by one of those samples, so you could go into Fabric today, do it, run the notebook in a matter of minutes, and have a working model. set up by my colleague Amir here, who's also in the audience, shout out to him. And this is a fault detection scenario for a manufacturing use case. So the idea is that we want to use some of these features in a factory, manufacturing setting to determine whether the machine is going to fail in sort of certain specific circumstances. And then once we've trained the model, we can predict based on things like temperature, the wear of a given tool, whether we're looking at trouble or not. So this notebook takes us through the end-to-end scenario. I'm going to glance over some of this, but just walk you through how the Fabric notebook is an experience that lets you install your custom libraries. You can access your data here with this integrated Lakehouse Explorer to bring in and load any data you need. And then we're going to train a model so that it uses really some of these features we see in the data set to ultimately land at that prediction of failure or not. We have the ability to, again, download the data, upload the data, preview the data, interact with our Lakehouse, and do pre-processing and exploratory analysis. So we can use open source visuals if we want. We can also use the Fabric display function, which I want to call out here as one of our developer experiences. This allows us to view it in a slightly higher fidelity pane. We can chart the data if we want, build our own custom charts here using this experience in Fabric. Do some balancing to handle anything we notice that's off in the training data set. And then once we get to the evaluation experiences, here's where that integration with MLflow really comes in handy. So we're training a random forest classifier, I think a logistic regression classifier, and then an XGBoost classifier. And as we do that, we can interact with these models from the notebook, but we also notice that they exist as experiments in our workspace. So this is the experiment view. If you go back to the workspace, you see here that it's a registered kind of line item here. It's a first-class experience. We have our models down here. And in the experiment view, you have the ability to look at all sorts of run metrics, parameters. I hope the screen still works here, and you can see, but let me zoom out a little bit too. And you can go into this view experience as well and directly compare runs with visuals that are built in. They're available out of the box. So you can kind of queue up some of these runs, and automatically we're seeing these charts come up that let us compare different scores and decide which of these experiment runs we want to be our model. So if we head back to our notebook, we're going to decide to go ahead with this random forest classifier. We could work on it in the notebook. We could also save, again, one of those runs that we've looked at here in the experiment artifact to its own registered model. So this is that model page I mentioned. And here, we could get started with any of these code templates, right? We could copy code to apply the predict function and put it in a notebook. But I want to show off the endpoint scenario. So let's say that we have this model and we want to set up an endpoint and get real-time predictions from Kusto in Fabric, or from a data flow, or from Power BI. Or maybe you have your own external web app and you want to use it that way, right? That's a really common scenario. We have these endpoints built in, as I mentioned. So we see here that for this version 1 of this random forest classifier, the endpoint is here. It's our default version for the overall model, and we see that it's active. If we switch to another version, we might see that it's inactive, and we can monitor all of them here up in this endpoints tab in the ribbon by clicking on this manage endpoints pane, so we kind of see the status of our deployments. These endpoints will automatically work, again, as I mentioned, if you call them. We will just go and provision things behind the scenes if you say, return me response, but you can also kickstart them in the UI just in a single click. So if I wanted to activate this inactive version, I could do so. We're going to notice that the status of that given endpoint switches to activating, and in a few minutes it will be live. So, if we were on a cooking show, this is kind of like the chicken that I put in the oven that will come out. I don't want to feed it to you now because it's raw, but we luckily do have this version 1 that is already active and running. So I want to pull this URL and use this model to generate predictions real time in another experience. So we could do this in a data flow, we could do it in our own app, but I actually want to go to Power BI since a lot of you raised your hands when Nelly mentioned that earlier in our session. If we're in a Power BI report, we can go into our advanced sort of integrated Power Query experience here, and I've queued up a few queries. So one of them is basically going to apply this.
It's tiny.
Sorry?
You need to make it bigger.
Oh, is it bigger?
Yeah.
Hold on.
If it's possible.
Ooh.
But I mean, if you know Power BI, you can kind of
let me see if I can
know what it looks like.
do you think I should zoom more? Or
can you see in the back? Nope.
No, okay, hold on.
It's, yeah, just use your imagination.
Well, I can try. Well, I want them to use their imagination. Well, let's
No, but I mean, like, yeah, I know, but it may be.
But we can pop into a data flow instead if that's easier.
Yeah.
So is this a little, that's a little better? That's better for y'all? Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
So again, you have the option of using, taking advantage of Power Query and data integration from the web experience or from Power BI. In this case, what I've done is I've gone ahead and written these two queries that are going to use the endpoint to return predictions either on just one row, so filling in those 6 feature values and getting back to prediction, or on an entire table. I took care of authentication before this, so we wouldn't bother you with that, but I haven't actually put in an endpoint URL to call. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just paste in that value here for this endpoint, and I wanna show you how I can then call my model endpoint from a data flow here. I'm gonna start with just a single point, so I took the first row of this test data. The machine type is gonna be represented by the 0, the air temperature is gonna be 300.6, the process temp is going to be 309.7.
So Aran, now you're basically putting in values as like a single line that you're scoring, right, with the model?
Yes, so this represents basically what the model would expect to get, and we want a prediction in return. It's going to be a 0 or a 1, which is a little anticlimactic, but what that means is true or false on a failure scenario, so it actually is important. And here, if we go ahead and click invoke on this, I've been told the Wi-Fi is a little spotty, but it did complete. So hopefully, yep, a 0 will come up. That indicates that our endpoint has worked and returned a false, basically. So here, so we're kind of in the
zero is good.
So 0 is good, but that was 1 point, right? So we noticed that that was 6 values that represent 1 data point, 1 prediction. We might want to do the same thing on a table, and that's really where this functionality becomes more useful. So I've gone ahead and loaded in fault test data that one of my teammates has provided. Because the integrated Power Query experience here with the data flow has access to all sorts of connectors, you could pull this data from your lake, you could upload a CSV, whatever you want. And we see here that we have those 6 columns which correspond to the features, but we do not have a prediction. So what I just did in the earlier example, right, was I kind of manually pasted in the first 6 column values for that row, but I can actually go here to another function that I've set up, and instead of sending in 1 row, I can send in the entire table that I showed you, which doesn't have a predictions column, click invoke, and that's gonna hit my endpoint for a prediction. It looks like it completed already. And then here, if I zoom out a little bit, I can show you that we've now added this new column here, which is predictions, 0s and 1s for that entire set. So we're not operating on 1 row anymore, we're operating on the whole table. Now, this is a simple example done with one of our samples, but I just wanna show you that this is the kind of experience you could really set up in 5 to 10 minutes in Fabric if you go in right now. We have a bunch of models. We want you to try this out with your own models, so we'd really love for you to get involved in the private preview, and Nelly will speak to that in a little bit. First, though, let me get back to her so she can talk about the AI experiences we'll have with Copilot and Fabric.
Thank you, Ren. Wow, isn't that cool? I mean, I'm biased, but I love it. And one of the things is also that the whole auto-magically creating these endpoints. It's amazing. It's like, why should there be so much complexity, unnecessary complexity in deploying models, right? And we're starting with ML models, and who knows, AI models are next, right, maybe? So we're gonna talk about AI and Copilot next, right? Because we showed you essentially our data science features. You saw a demo that's never been shown before, so you're very special to get to see that demo. And model endpoints are in private preview. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about our AI investments. And we're going to talk about Copilot a little bit as well. So across Fabric, right, we are introducing a set of new AI experiences. And Copilot's probably been the one that you've heard most about so far, right? How we improve the productivity of users. So the different categories of AI experiences, right? Accelerating productivity with Copilot, well, obviously that's Copilot experiences. And across every single workload in Fabric, you will see Copilot experiences. We're not going to cover all of them today. We're going to focus on some of the other generative AI experiences that we're adding, because I feel like you're getting the Copilot, your dose of Copilot in the other sessions. So we prioritized a little bit. But accelerating productivity is one, right? And then you get insights from AI, right? And I think that the Power BI Copilot in Fabric is really a perfect example of how you can get those insights from data, right? But there is another category of experiences as well that we're going to cover today which is how you build with generative AI on your own data and how you can customize that for your own data. So as I mentioned, we have a set of Copilot experiences today in public preview. Those are the pink ones that you see here in the slide. They are in public preview. So you have for Data Factory and the data flows, the pipelines are coming. Synapse Data Engineering and Data Science essentially is the notebook Copilot experience that can help you as you write code. And then we also have our Power BI experience as well. But you will soon also learn more about our data warehousing Copilot experience, our real-time analytics ones, and data activators. So everything in Fabric will have a Copilot. You'll have Copilot everywhere. So don't, doubt that for a second. But if we focus on data science and data engineering, that Copilot specifically helps you to perform tasks related for that persona, right? And this is what you can expect. So you're going to have a chat pane to the right-hand side where you can chat, it can give you code, you can add the code to your cell, but more importantly, what Raj is going to talk to you about and sitting here on Thursday in that session is really going deep into some of the other experiences that are coming inside the notebook related to Copilot. So I just wanted to put a teaser here for that. I'm not going to deep dive into that, and Raj is going to show you lots of demos and stuff. All right, now let's talk about how you build with generative AI on top of your own data. One of the things I want to get back to here is talking about Synapse ML, right, our library. And I told you earlier today that that's really our bridge into making that AI processing more scalable. Well, what's special about Fabric is that in public preview, we do have a built-in endpoint to call Azure OpenAI. So you actually don't have to pre-provision anything. If you are on a certain SKUs, P1 and F64 right now and above, you actually have access to a built-in AI endpoint that takes you directly to large language models like the GPT models in Azure OpenAI. And as new models become available, we intend to extend this endpoint. So you don't have to worry about that access. And what this means is that from the notebook itself, if you're a data engineer in Fabric, from that notebook, you can transform your data with LLMs. We also call this LLM programming. And we intend to make this simplified and easier, right? And this is where we want your feedback as well. And you can also, in addition to using our own APIs from Synapse ML, and this is a code-first experience, I realize that, right? You can also use libraries like LangChain directly in the notebooks to build out your own, essentially, generative AI solutions. But then, this takes coding, right? And I know that there's some stuff to learn when it comes to these things. A lot of the data engineers we talk to are very excited, but they are users that are very familiar with code already, right? But one of the ways that we want to take this further is really to say, how can we democratize building with generative AI inside of Fabric? Because that's really the theme, right? We simplify. We want it to take 5 seconds to sign up and 5 minutes until you get your first win inside of Fabric. That's really our philosophy. So we want to apply that also to Gen AI, right? And make that easier. So by introducing experiences for you to build Gen AI experiences on top of your data that don't necessarily require coding, we hope we can achieve that. We hope we can empower all of you to build out things, to be able to talk to your own data. I mean, we're going to have all this data in one lake. Wouldn't it be amazing if you can talk to all of your data? Well, that's what we intend to do. So in private preview, right now, we have an experience that allows you to build an experience to do Q&A over your data over structured tables. So that's what exists today. I'm going to walk you through what that experience looks today, and we're going to quickly evolve this, right? So I want to show you what we have right now, and then I'm going to talk about the direction forward. Inside of Fabric, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can, all right, there we go. We're introducing a new item. We call it AI skill for now, but the name is going to change, right? So you can just give it a name like anything else in Fabric, and then you land in an experience that quickly allows you to be able to add a lakehouse or a warehouse that you can work with. You say, hey, I'm a domain expert on this lakehouse or warehouse, and I want to empower my users in my organization to be able to talk to this data, because I'm getting so many questions about this data set, and I just, I want to spend that time on other things. So I want to empower them to just ask these questions directly. For example, from Teams Copilot, right? So I'm going to select a set of tables, right? And I'm a domain expert in this case, so I know roughly, I know the data set, I know the tables. And once I've selected these tables, I can then get started immediately interacting with the data, right? And I can ask questions like, what is the most sold product that we have, right? And you see that I'm getting some SQL back. It's because it's actually generating T-SQL code behind the scenes and giving it to you. It could also just give you the answer. But that makes it transparent. But this wasn't quite what I was looking for. So we're adding more and more customizations or in the knowledge that you can provide to the AI, starting with the text box. And yes, it's, the text box is there for now. It's going to be more in the future. And then you can say, well, most sold should actually be the total sales of volume, not the order quantity. And then you can tweak that and you can essentially get a new answer. So what we want to do is that we want to essentially integrate this experience with the rest of our data science features that you saw, right? So that as a creator in Fabric, I'm empowered to go and build out and evaluate and experiment and build out the best expert on my data and then make that available. So you see a publish option there in this screen, and that's essentially where you're going to be able to publish this to destinations like Copilot Studio for makers to use this as one of the knowledge sources to build out a brand new Copilot, or directly into M365 and the Teams Copilot. So you can have your users ask questions there and invoke this particular expert, right? So that's what we have in private preview. We'll post links so you can sign up for the private preview if you're interested in this. And again, natural language to SQL is just the beginning of this. So next, I wanted to show you also, and again, this is one of these things that we've never shown this before, but we really wanted to share this with this community, say, what's the direction of this going forward, right? Because you may have data that's sitting in one lake that's not in tables, right? It could be unstructured data that's just sitting in one lake. And we want you to empower you to talk to all of your data, right? Whether it's structured or unstructured, whether it's in a lake house or in a semantic model. So you can go ahead and create the item in your workspace, give it a name, and then once you have the data, you can not only work on the tables that we saw earlier, but also the unstructured pieces. So here, for example, we have some customer interview transcripts. So it's basically textual data sitting in the lakehouse. I can immediately start asking questions about this and get visualizations to show me what is in this folder, right? I can add another source, a semantic model in this case, and I can start exploring that data, and I can get the richness of the semantic model, like the synonyms and other things in it, right? And I can get beautiful Power BI visuals right here as a creator, as I'm shaping this experience for my consumers, right? So this is a creator experience right here. I can tweak the knowledge that the AI has access to. I can upload files. I can add things in a text box. I can point to a wiki, things like this. And I can continue to ask these questions and not only retrieve the answers that are sitting in my lake house, but also be able to query across the measures that exist in my BI semantic model, right? And that's really the power of this, that any data in one lake also means combining these different sources for you to tap into and get insights across the combination of these sources. We want to extend this to be able to invoke pre-built machine learning models for forecasting as well, as you saw there, and be able to publish this, as I mentioned, to Copilot Studio, M365 Chat, or other destinations through your applications that you're building out. And in the end, your end users can then interact with this experience that you built and get the answers that they need and talk to their data in this way. So that was a sneak peek of where we're going. And, it's been so much fun to present to you today. Erin and I really enjoyed this. And as we promised, we have some links and calls to action. We have private previews of our AI skill. Remember, the name is temporary. You can sign up for that private preview today. You can also sign up for Aren's private preview of the model endpoints, the real-time model endpoints, and there's also some additional links here. And if you're missing anything in Fabric, don't ever hesitate to post an idea into the ideas website so that we can see what you want to see. And we also posted our email addresses. Send us an email if you have questions or you want to learn more.
Come up and talk too. We'll be
come
here
up and talk
for
to
a
us
little
right
bit.
after the session. And by the way, here are some other sessions this week. If you want to deep dive into any of the topics that we talked about, you'll see the sessions here. And of course, you can find them in the WOVA app. I don't know how to pronounce it, WOVA. That's what I say.
WOVA?
WOVA,
Sure.
yeah. So that app as well, to look for it. And thank you so much for attending this session.